Good morning and welcome to the latest building webinar and the first of this year. Today we're talking about the digitisation of project information management, and today's webinar is being held in association with Asite. My name is Deborah Duke and I'm the Special Projects Editor at Building Magazine, and we're joined here today by some experts in this field. By Chris Peters, who is a Professional Services Director at Asite, who will talk a bit about the software involved in the digitalisation of project information management. Next, we'll be joined by Rob Clifton, who's Project Information Manager at Asite, who will talk a bit about the driving forces behind the digitalisation of project information management and talk us through a bit of the implementation as well. And then finally, we'll be joined by Dwight Wilson, Digital Engineering Manager at Imtech, who will discuss his hands-on experience with the digitalisation process and how that worked for him. So we'd ask you to ask a question at any time. While you're listening to our speakers, you can ask a question using the text box on your screen. We'll get to questions after all the presentations and we'll answer as many questions as possible, so do ask as many as you like. A quick reminder, the webinar will be available on demand from tomorrow on building.co.uk/webinars or using the registration link that you were sent when you signed up. So for now, I'll hand over to our first speaker, Chris Peters.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to do a quick introduction to Asite and how we can enable digitisation of the project information management. So, just quick background into Asite. We were formed back in 2001 on the back of Sir John Egan's Rethinking Construction report. This was really looking at how to streamline processes and delivering the efficiencies in the construction industry. Asite was actually formed to deliver the actual IT aspects of this to enable Sir John's vision as well. If we actually look back, this is something that hopefully will be familiar to some people, depending on how old you are. But if we look at the desk back in 35 years ago or so, you know, we had a Rolodex, a dictionary, a fax machine, telephone, calculator, a whole host of hardware and other information. What's actually happened now is technology has consolidated our daily necessities into one single laptop or tower to rule all of those applications. I mean, if you ask some of the younger generations today, they probably won't even heard of some of these. I know I've got some children, they wouldn't even know what a fax machine was. This does demonstrate how technology has revolutionised our world. It makes our lives simpler. It's difficult to see how the digital transformation has actually taken place if you look at it on a year-on-year basis. But if you actually take a snapshot of a longer period, it does really show a truly dramatic change of what we've witnessed. Something that we encounter every single day of our lives when we go into projects from Asite is, we like to call this a chaos diagram. When people are sharing information between different organisations, different disciplines, they're sending this via fax, email, USBs, and it's creating silos of data at each location. This leads to risk in the fact that people aren't always accessing the most recent information. You'll have multiple versions of information sitting at all these different locations. Like I said, different internal and external project teams maintain these information silos. When these are in play, project members struggle to get true visibility, which again wastes lots of time. It also increases costs and ultimately can put the project at risk. A significant percentage of rework is actually directly attributable to poor communication between these internal and external project teams. What we do at Asite is we actually sit in the middle of all of these organisations. Excuse me, my slide just jumped. So we actually sit in the middle of this in a secure environment. We actually support the whole life cycle of an asset from pre-construction through to design, construction, handover and facilities management. This actually breaks down all of those silos of data, and you've got one single source of the information sitting in the middle that everybody's accessing, eliminating the risk with one single version of the truth. And on top of that single version of the truth, there's a fully comprehensive audit trail. So no matter what happens during the course of the life cycle, you know exactly what's happening to your documentation. With the chaos diagram that I mentioned before, when you've got different silos, you don't really know what's going on. And I like to think of a typical example of that is something like an email. Yes, you can send an email. You can get a read or delivery receipt, but you don't really know what's happened to an email once you've actually sent that out. Yes, you know it's been delivered, but has it been passed on to anyone else? With the audit trail, it enables you to get that clear visibility across there. So how do we facilitate the whole life cycle of the asset? You can see here we've got a whole host of different modules that can help you digitize your project information management. We have process workflow management, document management. You'll see there BIM collaboration. So we actually have a fully integrated project information platform with these modules to suit any of your needs. I know Dwight, who's going to be speaking later, will be touching on some of these points as well. Just wanted to show you a cross-section of our customers, just to give you a flavour of the different markets that we're actually in. This slide actually shows a lot of construction based, but this project information management applies to any organisation, and this is just a cross section of our customers that have actually benefited from taking their processes and digitising it. Whether this is a fully enterprise solution or if it's just profiting for one or more of our single modules. Like I said, Dwight will discuss in a while what Intech's requirement was and how they have benefited from utilising multiple modules. So I just wanted to say some of the benefits. With the reduction of paper, companies are going green, but the digitisation of project information management actually provides so many more benefits. You can see some of these on the right hand side. Yes, there's a reduction in cost of paper related actions, but there's also less time spent searching, so administrative costs are actually reduced. There's also some intangible costs that we don't even consider. I've mentioned before risks, etc., that are involved in the project. If you've got a fully audited trail, you're actually cutting down those risks and eliminating a lot of potential future costs as well. We're also increasing, was actually improving response times to clients and customers. So instead of having to print documents off, send them in via post, emailing them, etc., creating multiple versions, as well as reducing costs of paper, what we're also doing is obviously allowing ourselves to improve communication times between client and customer. It also refocuses staff into critical tasks. What we want to do is get people in and out as quick as possible, so they're not actually spending time on the software, they're actually doing their day jobs. We can capture virtual information in real time, a more secure way of doing it, and like I said, it's actually better control and risk identification. Just focusing on one of the modules we have, we actually have something called App Builder. This is actually a powerful tool that allows us to change any manual document and replicate it within an electronic environment. So if you have any process or paper document that you're actually taking, regardless of the complexity, we can actually replicate it within an electronic environment and associate all the workflows around that process into the system. Custom forms actually hold intelligent data, so as opposed to static data, what we can do, we can actually report on this information, we can slice and dice it in any way and put it out into any format. So you're actually creating real-time reports and having that information at your fingertips at any time. As well as talking about this, Asite is all web-based, but if you're actually working out on the site, some of the time you obviously don't even have an internet connection. So we actually support offline forms as well. So as soon as you do get an internet connection, you can have that information being populated in. So you're capturing that information and not having to re-key that data in. If you're capturing it on paper, you'd have to come back in and then retype all that data. So again, we're streamlining all of our processes. As well as the benefits I've mentioned previously, there's obviously a lot of sustainability. We're taking away the paper environment. We're reducing the carbon footprint and your IT emissions, and we can actually then start tracking this. I've mentioned we can actually slice and dice data in any way. That means you can actually start tracking your sustainability initiatives as well. Also, it enables us to be able to share and learn best practices, and again, where we touched on some of those best practices and British standards that we actually adhere to as well. I just wanted to touch on the last point. Yes, paper can be a secure basis of actually capturing your data, but we've actually gone through a whole host of accreditations and hoops to be able to get compliance to make sure that your data is secure in an environment. Over the years, we have spent lots of money in research and development for both application development and infrastructure. We've had to do this to support our global user base and meet the government approvals for managing this data, both abroad and here in the UK. Through our cloud computing agreement with Opsource, we have the facility to expand the storage and processing footprint at a procurement lead time of near to zero. So this enables us to meet clients' demands safely in the knowledge that is held securely and always readily available. I just wanted to highlight one accreditation that we've got there with the UK Government Security Accreditation. We actually can hold data of a protected status. I know that's an old classification. I'm not up with the latest classifications, but it's equivalent to IL3. So you can be assured that when you are working with Asite, everything is in a secure environment. I said I've flown through those slides. This is just brief introduction to Asite and how we can actually digitise your project information management. Rob's going to actually speak a bit more, but I'll actually pass you back to Deborah.
Thanks very much, Chris. That was really interesting, and we're already getting some questions in. Just to remind you, you can ask questions at any time using the text box on the interface that's in front of you. So we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end of the webinar. But next, we'll hear from Rob Clifton, who's Project Information Manager at Asite. Over to you, Rob.
Good morning, all. So thank you for that introduction, Deborah. So my name's Rob Clifton. I'm a Project Information Manager at Asite, and my kind of day-to-day role, if you like, is to implement the Asite system and take companies through kind of how to digitalize their information, if you like. So I'm just going to run through a few slides on regarding the implementation and also kind of the future and the driving changes for the future of documentation. So the first stage to any implementation is to look at where a company sits currently in terms of its information management. So I tend to run through this with my clients that I sit down with when we begin the process of implementing Asite, is to establish exactly where they sit. So as Chris mentioned, we had a good diagram there of how much is now kind of on the phone, if you like. But if we run through this, we've begun with paper documentation that has transitioned into file server data. So data sat within the office of the project, if you like, which is accessible to the parties to the project. Not always as easily as some people would like, and I work with companies who have servers in separate offices, and it becomes a challenge to move that data across those offices. We've then kind of moved forward, kind of within the last, let's say, 10 years, seen a real growth in cloud file servers. So these are file servers that essentially sit within the internet, and they're accessible through web browsers to the information that people need. And the beauty of that, of course, is that there's no need for wide connection between the offices to be able to access that information, and it can be accessed far more easily on mobile devices, for example. So that's where we've got to in terms of file server. Now, the limitation of a file server is the fact that there is very little kind of in terms of control around that. It's a file server, but it's now in an environment which is more open and accessible to more parties in the project. And a limit on control in that runs a risk of devaluing your project information management. So in terms of moving forwards from there, then we now have this term electronic data management system, or EDMS is a term you'll typically see, and this forms part of a common data environment, or a CDE, terms you may have come across, in terms of managing project data but with a level of control on it. So this is the process we're kind of moving through, and as part of an implementation, what we will do is to look at these stages in terms of where a company sits currently, and then kind of work out then how that's going to impact to move towards an electronic data management system. Now, I've done implementations all over Europe and the Middle East, and we see in the UK, for the most part, we are obviously very strong on file servers, and we work with a good few companies now on cloud file servers or on EDMSs of current, who are just kind of moving across. But alternatively, if you kind of look at other regions across the globe, so the Middle East, for example, Saudi Arabia, you're working in environments there where it's a lot less advanced than we are here, and therefore we're moving from an email kind of means of management. So they're not really at the file server stage, and obviously that there's challenges around that, and the key challenge is the change itself. So in terms of the willingness to change and the management of that change is a real factor in how easy and how successful the implementation process will be. So if you're looking at kind of these systems, as I say, there needs to be a willingness and a driving force to change, and that's what we'll see an EDMS become really successful in terms of cost and time savings on a project. So talking of those driving forces, I'm just going to move on to kind of the key ones that I see at current within the environments in which we work. So obviously you've got kind of the top one I think most people will pick out is the mandates from the government. That is what we see as the biggest driving force now. It's the most common term I come across when I'm sitting with clients and asking what they want. Most commonly I will hear BS 1192 compliance, PAS 1192 compliance, those kind of items. So these documentations, these mandates are really central to the process of moving things forward in terms of digitalizing this information management. It is very difficult to be wholly compliant with BS 1192 just by using a file server. There needs to be a greater level of control and a greater level of management around a system for that to be successful and to be compliant, and therefore this is where EDMSs really come in. Then we've got a few other things kind of off the side of that. The first one I want to just come across is the improved infrastructure. So the internet speed, the ability to digitalize information means that it's in an environment that we need access to and quickly. Now, file servers are great, but if you're working on a file server, in Plymouth in the UK and you've got someone you're working with in Scotland, the kind of wired connection between them will see a real delay in terms of the movement of information. So internet speed, the improvement of internet speed has been a big factor in pushing these things forwards. So admittedly there's still limitations in terms of site internet, but you're looking at a 4G connection across the country now, which is vastly improved and allows for connectivity even in the most remote kind of areas. Now, kind of following on from that is the flexibility to be able to access our information on different hardware. So, of course, traditionally we're talking paper-based, we're talking desktop computers. We're now walking around with computers far more powerful than we ever had before in our pocket and access to all of the information we need on a project without ever needing the ability to kind of go to the office and get that information. And that is a big factor in then individuals in terms of contractors that we work with looking at this information and going, well, it's far easier and time efficient to be able to grab that drawing or specification on my phone while I'm out on site than it is for me to be able to walk up into the office and search for it on my computer. So that's been a real change, and the only way to be able to have those time efficiencies is to be able to have a digital project information environment. And then finally, I've put a picture of Heathrow Terminal 5 up there. Is commonly I come across when I work with kind of SMEs and I'm pushing in these systems is they request, well, what are the big companies doing? What are the market leaders doing? I mean, we're going to hear from Dwight later on about what Intech are doing, and the real kind of these pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Then you've got SMEs coming in behind. Admittedly, some of them are pushing the boundaries, but they want to know what are the good companies doing, if you like, and how do they match that and improve. So market leaders and the processes that they use is also a big factor in this. Okay, so moving on from there, kind of what are the benefits of digitalizing the project information management system then? So there's a few kind of snapshots I've just pulled up here from Asite, and I'm just going to kind of run through these in a little bit more detail. So the first is what we call a single source of truth. It's a one stop shop for the information on a project. Now, yes, a file server in an office may have been that. The issue that you have with that is that if you've got different parties, let's say different consultants from the design team, the architect, the M&E team, the civil structural, will they necessarily have access to that file server of contractor information? So on design and builds, it doesn't necessarily work in the same principle that a file server in the office is the single source of truth. But as we've moved to EDMSs, one kind of item in the cloud, then you have got that single source where people can go to grab that information. Now, core against the success of EDMSs is the ability to still maintain the history and the security that you know what is happening in your project. So audit history is a real kind of leading item in this. It's being able to track everything that's happened to the document, who's seen it, who's commented on it, who's approved it, that kind of process. Now, cloud file servers that I talked about, just storing information in the cloud so that people can access it, they are lacking in this kind of information, and that's where we've seen limitations with one major client that we've worked with, is that a cloud file server they were using didn't hold enough of the information they needed to successfully manage particularly large projects, and that was a big risk to them. So we have to kind of look at that as a major benefit as well. And kind of comes hand in hand with the audit history is also the ability to control your information a lot more. Now, on every construction project, there are processes in terms of who's approving documents, who is to comment on documents. And those processes historically may have been drawn out in a Visio diagram of this is the process we need to comply with. But tracking that is not always as easy as just saying, well, this document's going to go through this workflow, especially where you may be working with hundreds of individuals who are parties to a project. How is it possible to track that information if you're working in a non-digital environment? In terms of a digital environment, it's very straightforward. You have a process map here, for example, this is one I've pulled straight out of Asite, a visual representation of an automated workflow through which a document must proceed. So this is actually a BS 1192 workflow I've built for one of my clients here. And we say a document coming in must proceed through these gateways to reach the stage where it is shared or published with the team. So the ability to control and manage processes within the system is also a big benefit to this. Two final points to touch on. Reporting as well. Reporting has always been a major part in terms of managing construction projects, and the ability to digitalize information or data gives you a greater level of depth in terms of what you can report on. You're now capturing information that is not possible with a paper environment or a basic file server environment. We're getting a lot more information, which is allowing us greater depth of reporting, and therefore the ability to look further into our processes in terms of improving them in terms of time and cost. So that's a big part as well. And finally is speed. The ability to be able to go onto the internet and grab a large model or be able to see a large model within 30 seconds of me turning my computer on is a huge advancement in terms of the benefits of these as well. So we may have had email and the transfer of email, but if I try and attach a 10 megabyte file to my email, in cases that will bounce. So the ability to just go in and look at models that are gigabytes in size is a big factor. So those are some of the benefits we see of digitalizing the project information management. Okay, so then the final point I'm just going to touch on is the future progression of project information management. What can we expect to see in the future? This is something of particular interest to me and obviously to Asite, because we need to plan how the environment's going to look in 5 years' time to ensure we're meeting the expectations of our clients. So the first thing, cloud computing has exploded in the last 10 years in terms of growth. We've gone six-fold in terms of the revenue worldwide in the last 6 years. That's the whole kind of market, and in the next 4 years it's expected to double again. So cloud computing, particularly software as a service industry of cloud computing, is the fastest growing in the whole technology sector at current. So the real driving force behind that and the key to that going forward is how good our web browsers are. What are our web browsers doing? Because cloud computing is all dependent on the internet. So recently there's a report been published in terms of the increased use of Google Chrome as the fastest or one of the fastest web browsers, and the decreased use of Internet Explorer. So how good our web browsers are moving forward is going to be a big factor as well. Microsoft have quietly kind of introduced Word Online and Excel Online. So we're starting to see softwares that we historically associate with desktop systems, Microsoft Word, and others as well. Photoshop, for example, I know that's not related to the industry, but evidence of something that was very desktop heavy and now moving into the cloud or the web browser. And from a construction perspective, it's not long before I expect to see comprehensive cloud-based solutions for things like BIM, the authoring of BIM, for CAD, the authoring of CAD Online, and it'll be interesting to see what the software vendors of those products look to produce in the years coming forwards. Just another couple of items as well. We've got the obviously the improvement in mobile technology and mobile hardware as well. We've gone from fairly basic phones with limited power to phones now that are regularly having 8 or 6 gigabytes of RAM, more powerful than the laptops we're working with. So the power of those will be interesting as well. And then finally, I mean, this is a really forward-thinking item, but something of thought, not so much from the real heavy engineering side, but from specifications and the management of basic information on a project. We have Chromebooks that we've seen simply work with a web browser. That's all they're offering is a web browser, and they are now the most used operating system, or Chrome OS is the most used operating system in schools. Now, we would expect in 5 years' time that to reflect in terms of what people are using coming out of university. Just to put that into perspective, 5 years ago the most used was iOS, so iPads and iPhones, and we've seen the growth of those over the last 5 years, which is now kind of tailing off a little bit. So in 5 years' time, are we going to be looking at a different kind of system in terms of managing basic information from our machines and different kind of means of project information management as well? So it will be interesting to see how that develops. So that's everything from my kind of side. I'm going to hand back to Deborah now, and obviously, any questions, please just fire them across.
Thanks very much, Rob. That was really interesting. We're getting lots more questions in, which we'll address at the end of the session. For those of you who missed the beginning of this webinar, or who might like to look at the slides again in more detail, this will be available from tomorrow on building.co.uk/webinars, or just use the registration link that you were sent when you signed up, and you'll be able to access it again from tomorrow. Do ask a question anytime, getting lots coming in, and we'll get to those as soon as possible. But before then, we've got Dwight Wilson, who's the Digital Engineering Manager at Imtech, who's going to talk about his experience with the digitalisation process and how that worked for him. Dwight, over to you.
Thanks, Deborah. Good morning, everybody, for listening in. Today I'm going to run through Imtech's digitisation journey. In short, Asite have assisted us quite a lot on this journey, and we are a year into it, so I want to kind of overview what was good and what challenges we faced on that journey. A little bit about me. Yes, as previously mentioned, I'm Digital Engineering Manager at Imtech Engineering Services. I'm also a member of the CIBSI BIM steering group, and very passionate about digitisation in BIM, in construction, and I sat on the CIC BIM 2050 group, and also co-founder of Built Environment, who are all about the digitisation of construction and how everyone can be enabled and involved in it. Check them out, it's quite cool. Skipping over. Now, point at hand is digitisation and why. We had quite a precise list of things that we wanted to achieve, and as mentioned before, one of them was compliance with BIM standards. That was first and foremost, and it was something that would be better achieved through taking a digitisation or a digital route than trying to do it in our existing processes and methodologies. What that brought with it was a plethora of benefits. Looking here, we had easier sharing, version control, cloud-based and secure, a mobile-ready solution. Picking up on points earlier made in this webinar about the future and how we're progressing, mobile-ready and being cloud-based is a massive advantage in delivering our business. One big thing we wanted to do is replace site servers, which is currently quite an expense in maintenance, obviously in procurement of those pieces of hardware, and bigger ambition is to enable paperless sites. Also, we're looking at linking in our snagging, improved QA, reporting, and totaling together in a digital information management process and procedure that we'd use on all projects. A bit more on the why on the digitisation. This arose because we were evaluating, why do we waste so much? And there were, everyone kind of clued up with BIM, probably heard about the 30% saving the government wants to make from waste, And we identified a lot of waste was wasted in time internally doing things. It's not necessarily, physical waste on sites. It was waste in process, which also cost money and delays. And we looked at what our tier 1 were doing, because Imtech typically operate at tier 2 level, and they all seem to have a digitally managed service of some sort. Whereas when it came to us and we were looking at managing our tier 3s, we were doing it by various means of communication, unsecured, cloud-based, Dropbox, WeTransfers, email, DVDs, USBs, anything we could get our hands on, which wasn't very well managed and obviously caused quite a few problems. So moving on from that, we established what we called a minimum standard of what we wanted to achieve with the Asite platform. Oh, sorry, skipping away. And primarily it was to do this list of things, which is to manage our RFIs, establish a way to smooth the tendering process using some of the custom forms, enable better workflow management, that's around our processes, and I'll touch on that later. Better reporting and accurate reporting, not assumption-based reporting. And that would happen through using the platform and using the data that was collected around project activities. Capturing project mail was a problem we had for auditing, going back and looking at claims and trying to sort out issues on projects. We were missing information, and establishing a project mailbox was quite important, and it was something this could do quite well. QR coding was another big ambition for the site teams, to connect the, say, digital processes in the office to what's happening on site, and making sure everybody had the right and correct information and were working to the latest information available, and to enable mobile access. And that was the minimum standard we set out at the beginning of our implementation journey. Now, one of the key things here was a change in emphasis in our team structures, and we had to implement a information management team. Now, traditionally, they were our document controllers, but with the platform, they needed upskilling and a clear definition of their responsibilities in order to actually deploy the platform successfully throughout the business and support the teams. And this was a basic representation of the structure we built up, which was supported by a digital engineering team, IT department, and they all three worked together to support the implementation of the digital processes. Now, this is a brief overview of our journey through 2016. In here, we can see that we agreed our enterprise agreement with Asite in Q1, established the aforementioned department, and really worked on developing some training and guidance, which was really important to make this a successful deployment. In Q2, we focused on some custom development, which primarily was around the tendering application, and we started to roll out training programs in the business. The third and final thing in Q2 was the graphical workflow implementation, which really changed the way we work day to day on projects. In the third quarter, we started looking at snagging and defect management on the platform and developing that and how we could use it on projects. And we managed to deploy our QR coding application or feature on projects, which was very well received. Lastly, not least, in Q4, we got to the point where we were quite happy with this minimum standard, and the ambition is in this year to roll it out on every new project we have, so we have a uniformity across the business. Touching on some key features next, or some of the, say, most successful features. So, I mentioned it earlier, which was the tendering app. Now, this has been very key in streamlining a process that was quite messy, was the way we receive information and the way we go out for information from our supply chain. In this form was actually built in the custom app builder, which was referred to earlier. And what this allows is for the supply chain to access a single source of information and structured responses are received through using a custom form. So we typically define the list of deliverables we want, and they will price against it. That also allows us to do instant bid comparisons and reduces massively the administration time around processing tenders, which is something that was quite not a problem, but not as efficient as it could have been previously, and this has massively changed that. On top of that, we can report on every attribute of the received bids and do deeper analysis. The next key feature we implemented was the QR coding, which was very, very simple and straightforward. This obviously enabled our site teams to know what were the latest drawings or documents we use on site, and prevented mishaps in information that shouldn't be being used, which wasn't a regular occurrence but had been known to happen, and this completely cleared it up. One of the most game-changing features we implemented was the graphical workflow. This is especially useful around our drawing management, where we typically use subcontractors. Here you can see, and I think Rob touched on it earlier, this massively helped us to align our standards and our processes with the PAS 1192, BS 1192 recommendations and standards, and it gave visibility of what was happening with the documents or drawings at each stage in their life cycle. That reporting has made a massive difference in the lean aspect of our processes, and they work a lot better. Rather than being there in word, they're there in action, and they cannot be avoided. Not everyone loves that, but it is a massive efficiency tool, and it's really good for the business in delivering accurate, on-time technical information. The last part, excuse the slide, the last part of the key features building on especially tendering and graphical workflows is this custom reporting and dashboards, where we could report on anything in the platform. So the massive drive was to make sure everything is in the platform, and then we could decide on what data and what comparisons to pick out and use. What it has also enabled us to do is to get rid of some of the manual registering of documents and the manual tracking of documents, which typically happens even with some EDMS systems. You have it inside the system and you also track it manually outside the system. What we've managed to do is build reports in such a way that we've got rid of about 3 or 4 of our traditional registers that we keep, and the system does it for us, which frees up the time of our information managers now and the information controllers on projects to actually be QAing and doing process compliance rather than tracking documents, which is a non-value added, time-consuming task. That was really has also revolutionized the way we manage information on projects. Now, just briefly, I'm going to touch on some upcoming things we're working on. This quarter, we're really looking at the digitization of our site forms. So these are ones we got to site with. The difference is they need to be enabled to be used offline and designed to work in that fashion. So we have a big push this quarter to do that, and that would lead into the next quarter where we push using the tablet app, which is also very good, on site as a inspection and test tool and a health and safety auditing tool. And that is a real big push for the first half of this year. Based on that, we also want to digitize our commercial suite of documents and processes, such as around delay notices, etc., so they all go through the platform. Finally, in the last half of the year, one of our biggest ambitions is an API integration with some of our tier 1 contractors. So at this moment in time, we have to replicate the information manually for it to sit in our system, but we are in discussions to build automatic API links into the tier 1 contractor systems so that the information is automatically replicated to us, so we can manage that and use it within our supply chain. And the final part there is a drawing and model management application. So I haven't really mentioned BIM in this because this is mainly focused on the information side of stuff and less the modeling side of things. However, in the last quarter, we're looking at an application built on the platform which can manage the processing of models and model information and drawing information in a much more streamlined fashion. And that is as much I can say about that right now, but it is an ambition for the fourth quarter of this year. What I'd like to end on was some lessons learned from our first year of digitization, and I'm going to run through them from top to bottom. Training is essential. Training is the core of a successful implementation, as I've written there, and getting everyone up to speed and in agreement of what you're doing and not leaving people behind. You will see that sometimes your biggest critics will be your biggest allies, and that's through training and the patience of sitting down with them, explaining how it can benefit them. Another one we've learned is minimum viable product. We always want to shoot for the stars and we want everything to be brilliant first go, but in this development, you kind of enter a development space when you start to digitize, and you've got to be very aware or know what your minimum viable product is and how you can build on that. And we've gone through development loops and found out that ourselves, it's good to know it up front. Clarity and specifications, clearly specify what you want from this, always have that in mind, and then this will be a lot more successful, and that's really that point. Clear guidance materials ties into training. Support, those 2 points are really about supporting the people you're taking on this journey. The recognition that the development of digital tools is continuous. You're not going to do it once and it's going to be there, perfect forever. As with the advancements in technology, you're going to want to do a bit more, and you need to allow for that, and that needs to be recognized in your planning phase or your deployment strategy or your digital strategy, that these things will need to be updated. And moving on to the cultural change, and that kind of ties into this continuous development, this continuous improvement. It's a cultural change. Make sure you identify and support your change agents on this journey, and throughout all departments of your business, not just the ones that are actually deploying the platform. It needs to touch everyone that will be affected by it. And the last one I'll say, always consider impact versus benefit for the users of the system. Just because it works at a high level process level, it may not work for the person using it day to day, and they always need to be considered in any business decision around digitization, implementation of a platform, and development of new tools. And that's me finished for the day. Not for the day, for the moment, I guess. I'm sure there's some questions coming up, and I'll hand back. Yeah, how you going?
Thanks very much, Dwight. That was fantastic. So we've got lots of questions, and we've got about 15 minutes to get as many of them answered as we can. We'll start off with a couple of very quick win questions. So the first one I'm going to ask to Chris is coming from John Duffy. He simply says, file sizes, ? Can you tell us a bit about the file sizes involved?
Certainly. Like you said, it's a quick question. There is no limitation on file size. We actually don't have any limitation on data either. But the only thing you need to consider really is your internet connection. So obviously a large file size may take a little while to upload, but we've optimized those upload procedures as well. So there is no limitation on file size.
Well, that was easy. So the next one I think I'm going to put to Rob. It's from Catherine at Skanska Technology. She says, as a document controller, it's important that IMSs are flexible, and many I've tried just aren't. Can Asite be tailored to each business individually, or is it a generalized layout? Rob?
So thank you for that question. Yeah, so Asite is a highly configurable system. The key kind of to it is the setup process. So at the point of use, it won't necessarily appear as flexible as it is when you're setting up. So the key The key lesson, I suppose, is that to be involved in the setup, ensure you're specifying exactly what your requirements are. That there's so many settings and different options. I think Dwight ran through a few of those. There's so many different options to apply to your project. But if you're necessarily just a user of the system, you might not see the flexibility that's been defined by the project information manager at an earlier stage, or a document controller that precedes you, or something along that process. So at the start, yes, 100% as configurable as you like, but as you're using through the project, you probably won't see that because it needs to be controlled.
Okay, thanks for that, Rob. The next question is I'm going to direct at Dwight. It's from Brian at BPM. He says, is App Builder an automated conversion tool or manual production of the electronic documents and workflows? Dwight, can you answer that one?
Hi, Brian. It's not automated. There is a development process for creating these forms, and it's using InfoPath primarily. It is simple to do, and Asite do support you, and they give you specifications. And it is, I'd say, best in our experience if you have someone internally that understands it, so they can do very detailed and well thought out specifications to make the process as simple as possible.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Dwight. So I've got an interesting question here from Sushil at Second London Wall, which I think I'm going to ask Chris. He says, is the system only as good as the person using it?
That is a good question. Yes, it is primarily, but we obviously have put certain things in place to ensure that data or that input is as good as it possibly can be. Rob and Dwight have both mentioned the Visual Workflow Manager, which enables you to drive it down certain processes, but also we can enforce naming conventions and ensure certain data is always captured on the upload as well. So we can actually enforce the quality of the data. But primarily, yes, it is only as good as that person who's putting that data in.
All right, thanks for that, Chris. I think I'm going to turn over to Rob now. We haven't mentioned BIM very much in this. Can you just talk through how the digitalisation of project information management can help with compliance to BIM?
Right, I'll try and answer this fairly briefly because it's something I do kind of a lot of the time. So the BIM kind of I'm referring to is the document management process of BIM, BS 1192. So BS 1192 is the standard by which documents are to proceed through certain gateways to reach a shared, i.e. with a project team, or a published, that's a contractual document status. Now, the process of doing this, if you take in traditional items, which I've seen as like traditional kind of file servers, is to have folders where you move information into the different folders. Now, it works in principle. You've got a couple of kind of major risks that you introduce there. The first is that there's no defined approval to reach into those folders. So for example, anything that reaches a published status must go through an authorization, typically by the employer's representative or client's representative. So if you're just using a file server perspective, you don't have the ability to ensure that is happening. EDMS, the way that they typically will manage this is through metadata. Metadata is the key to doing this. This is information tagged against each document to ensure that it proceeds through the correct path to ensure compliance with BS 1192. So we saw a couple of the visual automated workflows there. That is typically the way that we'll do it. We'll say if a document is uploaded into folder X, then it must proceed through a status change or an approval from individual Y, and then a further approval or authorization is the correct term, authorization to reach contractual through from the client or representative. So yes, EDMS have a big part to play in this in terms of the metadata usage, which you don't have available in file servers, whether they be local or in the cloud.
Right, thanks, Rob. I've got a question now from Peter at Orion PPM. Which I'm going to address at Dwight. He says, the benefits of digitisation and control of project data is well understood, but an area of concern is that we're finding when people read online, they tend to scan rather than read the information. Have any of the speakers, we'll start with Dwight, seen any evidence of this?
Hi, thanks. That's a great question, and it has been raised internally. At this moment in time, we've not been massively draconian on preventing people from printing information off. It is literally down to whatever the person is most comfortable doing. Some people are very good when they are using online tools. They're competent with PDF readers. They highlight, they annotate deeply. So we let whoever's most comfortable, best way to process the information. If it's printing or using it digitally, you have the options to do so. There's no real measure you can put in place to stop people from saying that they've read something. If they scanned it, they can do that in hard copy or or digitally. But we just like to give people the option to use whatever they're most comfortable using.
Would any of the other speakers like to come in on that? Or I think Chris.
Yeah, thanks. We've not actually encountered that, but obviously experience like Dwight's had. But no, we've not encountered that. We do have an online viewer that enables us to be able to view those documentation online as well. So I'd appreciate people would scan read it, but you can actually access all the information online. So we've not actually ever had that encountered.
And Rob?
I think it comes a little bit to culture change as well. Obviously, traditionally, people are so used to opening up things from their own machine and it being in their PDF viewer that they're used to, or the Word document that they're used to, and they know that seeing that means they must go into the depth of reading that. So I think as you slowly transition more to online viewers and web viewers, not just within Asite, but across all kind of all systems, I think that the idea that you read it because you are aware that you must look into that in more depth will become more second nature, if you like.
Okay, I've got another one for you, I'm afraid, Rob. This time it's from Abby Oden, who's from Lighthouse Architecture. He says, do you have any considerations for low or weak internet areas?
So we've done quite a lot of work on a desktop kind of aspect of our system called a Doddle Navigator, which basically it pulls down some of the information for localized use, if you like. So we've had quite a lot of success in South Africa with that at the moment. Obviously, an area that's not got great internet across the country, and we've done again quite a bit in the Middle East where you've got remote sites. That don't have the same strength of internet that we experience all across the UK. So yeah, we have a tool to do that. Obviously, we would anticipate across the kind of world that the global infrastructure for internet will improve with time, as it has done significantly in the UK over the last 15 years. So yeah, improvement with internet, but we do have a solution there to support businesses who work in environments where the internet won't be that strong.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got a question here from Lenia from TfL. It says, can users create their own documents in the app builder, or does this need to be made as a request to Asite? So Chris will take that one.
Yeah, thanks, Lenia. Yep, you can actually have the ability to create your own documents or intelligent form. So depending on how complex that process is, but yeah, with simple, Dwight mentioned training, simple half-days training, you have the ability to be able to create that. It is just in the background a Microsoft tool, so if you're au fait with any of the Office suite, you have the capability to be able to build out those forms yourself.
Right, fantastic. I've got a question here directed specifically at Dwight from Sean from TfL. He says, in regards to the management of reviewing of documents and then capturing comments, how was this managed and closed out? Dwight?
Sorry, I was looking at another question. Well, I can answer that one as well. So in terms of capturing comments and closing them out, this happens through the graphical workflow. So the workflow pushes the required action to the required party. It may be comment, it may be incorporate a comment, upload a new drawing, change status. They do that, and that's recorded against the document or the file that they are actioned on, and that is kept in a log. So as soon as they've done that, everyone can see it, and it moves on to the next part of the workflow. Once everyone's completed their actions against that particular file, then that workflow is completed, and that's all recorded. While I'm on, for Sean, he asked an API question about where we're taking it next, effectively. And really what we want to do is negate this Typically at Tier 2 level, we have all the information in a Tier 1 system, but we still need to keep a record for ourselves. So we end up downloading and keeping it on a file server. We're aiming to get towards a point where we can fully integrate all that information to automatically be put in our cloud system, so we can distribute it to our supply chain, which are not always included in our Tier 1 systems. As well as that, we're looking to integrate model transfers and issues, as well as RFIs and questions, so RFIs and queries between the two platforms, so we can give our supply chain a commonality for operating with us, and it interfaces automatically with whoever we are working for.
Okay, fantastic. So we've got a question from Brierley from Asset Lifecycle Solutions. I'm going to put this one to Chris. It says, does this system include alerts for response deadlines, Chris?
Yes, indeed they do. There's many different ways you can configure those alerts. It could be an instant notification that you can receive in your email. So you can actually click on that notification and take you directly into that information. Or you can have summary notifications, or even reports delivered to you. So if it's a log of open RFIs, for example, you can have notifications on a daily basis, or however you want to schedule those reports. So there's many different ways you can be notified from the system.
Thanks very much, Chris. I'm also getting some people asking, who might have come in late to the webinar, asking if it's going to be available. Yes, it will be available on demand from tomorrow from building.co.uk/webinars, or using the registration link you were sent when you signed up. I think we've just got time for just 2 or 3 more questions. We've got one here from Christina, who asks, which is the browser most convenient to use Asite on? I'll pass that question over to Rob.
It's a pretty simple answer, really. Whichever browser is most convenient to you, Asite will work in any kind of browser. It's built in HTML and HTML5, so you'll find that if you run tests online, you'll find that Mozilla Firefox and Google Chrome tend to be the faster to deal with that. But it runs in anything you use, whichever you wish. I think Internet Explorer is slowly dying a death, if you like, overtaken by kind of Microsoft Edge, or will be by next year. So it's really up to you. It will work across anything. It's what's most convenient for you.
Okay, thanks very much. I've got a couple of other just very quick answer technical questions. There's one here from Roger who says, does Asite system make use of Adobe's Intelligent PDF? I'll pass that to Rob, I think.
Thanks for that question, Roger. Something I'll have to check with our technical team, to be honest. I will, we'll probably let you know on that one. I think I've not got an answer for you right now, unfortunately.
And we have another from Sean from TFL. Thanks for all the questions, Sean. That's fantastic. So Sean asks, will Asite be linking into the Office products within the cloud to make it easier for companies to deploy the solution on the IT infrastructure? Who'd like to take that one? Rob again, I think.
So I think the Office Cloud is definitely something we're looking at. The issue with it at the moment is there's limit in terms of the functionality you've got within their cloud services. So it's something we're looking at, but the use is very restricted at the moment. I keep going back and seeing what they keep adding and trying to use it, but it's not there yet. I think the real interest will be when there's a real kind of CAD or BIM solution authoring tool within the cloud. Then we will really start to take interest in those. But we'll keep an eye on the Office products and see how they develop over the next 6 months for sure.
All right, and I think we've probably just got time for one more question. I think Chris has volunteered to take another one from Sean. Chris.
Yeah, thank you. So the question was around during the implementation digitalisation, the information workflow, how is this managed within the system with regards to the digital plan of works, etc. We actually do have well, there's going to be a lot of acronyms that I'm going to fire at you, but we have an IDP, which is an information delivery plan, which allows you to actually schedule all of this out at stages, so for each of your gateways, and you can actually assign the deliverables against each supplier and also the level of detail that is required. And this actually allows you to then track when that information is actually hit into the system as well with a RAG status.
All right, thanks very much, Chris. I'm afraid we've run out of time for questions, but as I've said, you can access all these slides from tomorrow on building.co.uk/webinars, or you can just use the registration link that you were sent when you originally signed up. So it just remains for me to thank our speakers, Rob Clifton, Dwight Wilson, and Chris Peters. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for attending today. Thanks.